Hardly a day can go by anymore without coming face to face with incredible suffering, with the backdrop of the pandemic and the financial fallout from that, the social unrest in the face of inequality and racism, blatant racism, and the staggering abuse of power and the lack of leadership in the face of all these crises. I suspect that we've all had a moment or two of personal distress. And so today I'd like to talk about the difference between genuine compassion and personal distress. These two are very different states of mind, and the more we know about each one of them, the more conscientious, the more intentional we can be in our responses to the inevitable suffering that we're going to confront each day. And by talking about these two states of mind, I hope to further integrate it in my own understanding, and hopefully it will be of benefit to others as well. So I think we'd agree that compassion is very important in our lives, in our own personal lives, as well as in our society too. It's integral to our daily experience. When we're confronted with pain, instinctively we feel for the suffering person, and I think we all want to help. And when we ourselves are suffering, we're grateful when someone reaches out to us and acknowledges our suffering, our pain. So compassion, broadly defined here, is in a sense of concern that arises when we're confronted with another's suffering or our own. And included with that is a sense of wanting to see that suffering alleviated. Either we ourselves try to do something, or we try to find help, someone else who can alleviate that suffering. In the Mahayana Buddhist tradition, compassion takes on a broader context of wishing for all beings equally to be free of all suffering on every level. And so this isn't just a nice wish, this is supported by a Buddhist worldview that understands the Four Noble Truths, that there is suffering. There are precise causes of suffering. There's a way to be completely free of suffering, radical. And there's a path, precise path that leads to that eradication of suffering. Our compassion also is supported by an understanding that every living being has this innate wish to be free of suffering and wants lasting happiness, and is confused about the causes. There's also a deep awareness of the kindness that we have each received from every living being in countless previous lives. And also a fact that our lives are increasingly dependent on others' lives. And this has become so evident with the pandemic, I think. And also for Buddhists, compassion is an indispensable quality for attaining full awakening. We can't do it without compassion. So it's a state of mind that we actually want. So let's look at some of the distinctions between compassion and personal distress. Compassion is a state of mind, an emotion, we could call it an emotion, that we see as beneficial, something that we actually want to cultivate in our minds. Whereas personal distress, which is the near enemy of compassion, when our compassion is not very strong, when our compassion is weak, then we may slip into an uncomfortable, often an overwhelming sense of distress that we actually want to get away from. We don't want to cultivate that state of mind. Genuine compassion focuses on the person or the people who are suffering and wishes for them to be free of that suffering. Whereas personal distress is completely focused on our own pain at experiencing another person's suffering. So the focus is very different. Compassion is actually a very courageous mind that's cultivated voluntarily and for a very specific purpose. In our practice, in our tradition. Compassion, great compassion, leads to the wholehearted resolve, which leads to the aspiration to achieve awakening for the benefit of all sentient beings, and Buddhahood is not possible without it. This is different from being overwhelmed by a sense of distress when our attention turns to our own pain and discomfort at witnessing another's suffering. Personal distress has no real purpose other than distraction in our mind. Compassion is a correct consciousness that allows us to see the situation more clearly. Could we say it's a valid state of mind? It's an accurate consciousness. It helps us to assess the situation more accurately because we're able to see a larger picture. We can more easily see what needs to be done and realistically assess what we're capable of contributing to the situation. So there's a lot of honesty involved. Also, we can assess what the other person or the other people are capable and responsible for as well. And also checking out to see if maybe someone else or something else is going to be more suitable for actually providing the help that's needed. With personal distress, we lose our ability to discern what is our responsibility and what is the other person's responsibility. Personal distress is an afflicted, I think we say, maybe it's a combination of afflictions, but it's an afflicted state of mind. It's a clouded state of mind that can lead to so much sadness or confusion or disturbance, turbulence in the mind that we're unable to do anything to actually be of benefit. We may even feel guilty at another's suffering and think that we should be able to fix it. So it's a very different kind of mind. So just thinking about these distinctions can help us to check up and assess what's happening in our mind when we're confronted with something in the news. You know, when you read about the escalating numbers of COVID in the US, for instance, or, you know, yet another story about someone who has fallen to the hands of an abuser of some kind. We can really check to see, well, what's the tone of my mind? What am I saying to myself? What do I feel? What's happening in my body? Is there tension rising? And get to know the different sensations that are associated with genuine compassion when our focus is going, our energy, our focus is going one direction towards the other, or when we're bringing that focus and energy towards ourselves. We can check to see, am I resourced enough today to actually read this story or to hear about this tragedy? Really assessing what our minds can take in a certain day. I think a number of us here at the Abbey have started doing little news fasts, you know, consciously reading less news as a way of keeping ourselves resourced. We can reaffirm our motivation to be engaged in the world with genuine compassion. You know, that's like a strong way to start the day. I intend to be a compassionate person. I want to cultivate my capacity to have greater and greater compassion for others and the difficulties that they are experiencing. And so that can increase our determination then to work with what comes up and to stay conscious about how we're engaging with information. We can also remember that we can't control everything in the world, and that helps us to accept the situation as it is. After all, we're in samsara. We have samsaric bodies. We're controlled by karma and delusion. We're bound to experience the unwanted. Part of our practice of patience also is to accept suffering, our own suffering, suffering of others, and to work with it in a way where we can transform that suffering into part of our practice. In fact, we could say that's true of all the perfections, you know, finding ways to bring generosity to the situation, finding ways to bring a greater expression of our ethical discipline to the situation, patience, choice, effort, etc. Calling to mind any of the number of mind training techniques is going to be helpful. Shantideva comes to mind. If it can be remedied, why worry? If it can't be remedied, and really assessing if that's the case. If it can't be remedied right away, then what's the use of worrying? And we can also do Tonglen practice to strengthen that aspiration, that altruistic wish to be of benefit to others. So these are just a few things, but it doesn't look like the pandemic's going to end anytime soon or the financial crisis. We're going to be with this for a while. So it's a great opportunity to actually work with our minds, to get to know our minds even better, to understand the flavor of the different states of mind that move through our minds during a day, and to conscientiously, intentionally work with what comes up. So I hope that's helpful.